Secretary Norton, in your responses to Chairman Waxman, you denied that changes in OCS drilling policy were undertaken as part of the Interior Department's efforts to implement the Cheney Energy Task Force plan. In 2001, in reality, the Department of Interior, under your leadership, stopped even considering the possibility of a worst-case oil spill when it was evaluating the potential environmental impacts of deepwater oil and gas production activities. Secretary Norton, do you agree that it was wrong for you to ignore the potential for a worst-case oil spill for deepwater oil and gas production activities?
Congressman, I'm sorry, I do not know the document to which you're referring. I don't know exactly what it is that you are referring to in that decision. I apologize, I don't recall.
Well, it is true that you, and I have the document right here in my hand, and I will give it to you so that you can review it later, but I will just summarize it for you, that you stopped considering the possibility of a worst-case scenario spill in 2001. Your 2001, quote, strategy for post-release NEPA compliance in deepwater areas of the Gulf of Mexico did, in fact, change the manner in which the Interior Department evaluated worst-case impacts. Let me read to you what the Interior Department staff informed our staff about these changes in 2001. These analyses, quote, do not include oil spills as part of the review. In other words, environmental assessments no longer had to include the worst-case spill scenarios that had been used previously by the Clinton administration. Madam Secretary, you chose to replace a real-world worst-case analysis with a paper exercise that was not at all realistic. As the Interior staff has informed my staff, quote, the belief at the time was that blowouts were such a low probability event that the time and effort being expended on analyzing them for site-specific environmental assessments was not worth the effort. Do you agree, Madam Secretary, that that decision was a mistake?
I think going forward, you're going to have to grapple with the aftermath.
Do you agree that the decision that you made at that time was a mistake?
You can't stop all drilling in the future.
I'm not asking for any stopping. No one here wants to stop all drilling in the future. No one. So stop putting the red herrings out here. Did you make a mistake in 2001?
I don't know the document you're referring to. I haven't had the chance to look at it. It seems to me that you have to have a reasonable analysis, and that's both today.
Was it reasonable to not do a worst-case scenario analysis for a spill? Yes or no?
It was reasonable to take into account what the history had been. The history was.
So you don't any
there were
longer.
very few large spills.
Okay, let me go on to the second question. In 2000,
I think we now have seen a very different change.
In 2003, Madam Secretary, the Department of Interior, also under your leadership, actually exempted most Gulf of Mexico lessees from including blowout scenarios in their oil and gas exploration or production plans. They were also exempted from a requirement to provide information about how long it would take to drill a relief well and how a blowout could be contained by capping the well or by other means. This policy was reiterated in both 2006 and 2008. As a result, BP didn't include any of these blowout scenarios or relief well plans in its plans for the Macondo. In retrospect, do you think, Madam Secretary, that this exemption was a good idea?
My understanding is that under the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, there is a process of looking at things on a broad scale that really ought to focus on big picture.
Do you think it was a mistake to create those exemptions in retrospect,
Madam Secretary? It is appropriate to deal with those kinds of issues in an offshore situation by looking at those from the big scale basis, and then for the individual wells, the individual plans of exploration, you focus on those things that apply to that.
Madam Secretary,
well.
again,
and so you need to have things
there was
a
Madam Secretary, there was a deregulatory ticking time bomb that was set while you were Secretary that has now exploded in terms of this blowout preventer and other devices not having been properly regulated. Do you believe, in retrospect, it was a mistake to create those exemptions?
I haven't seen anything that would indicate that there is a cause and effect relationship between the Deepwater Horizon decisions that were made by BP and what this analysis is that you're talking about.
You know, a climate, Madam Secretary, of complacency was created by boosterism, which has now led to a catastrophe. And that boosterism, that complacency, was this deregulatory environment which was created during that 8-year period. It affected blow-up events. It affected the spill response plans that needed to be put in place. It, in fact, dealt with all aspects of what it is that we are now dealing with as a consequence of those decisions.